Good morning, everyone. Happy New Year.
Good
Hope,
morning. Happy New Year.
hope everybody's doing all right. And welcome back. Just an FYI, we'll sort of be back on a more normal adult education schedule pretty soon. We'll have lunch and learn on Wednesday, and then this class again next Sunday, followed by Psalms Monday the 12th, and we'll just keep on chugging along. So hope everybody has enjoyed the winter holidays and ready to return to somewhat normal life. I wanted to open this up to we talked about a lot of different things for the B'nai Mitzvah class, the class about B'nai Mitzvah, and obviously I'm happy to go on to the next topic, but I just want to ask if anyone has any leftover thoughts or questions regarding B'nai Mitzvah because there was a lot to unpack there. Not a
Well,
problem. Oh, go ahead.
I
Yeah,
got
please.
one thing.
Go
I
ahead.
remember when my two brothers were bar mitzvahed, which would have been, I don't know, whatever, 50 years ago, more or less, in Portland, in a Reformed congregation. And back then, in that group, it was a big social event, like party planning and sending out invitations, because Reformed Jews at the time didn't go normally, most people didn't go to services every week. Um, like our congregation does. Um, and I just wonder how much, I'm assuming there's a broad range of how much the social and cultural and societal norms impact our practice of Judaism. It seems to me it's a lot.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's one thing that's been fascinating. This I've heard about. I don't have any reference to it specifically. Apparently, there is a trend among not about among some non-Jewish 13-year-olds who decide to have a bar or bat mitzvah party because their Jewish friends have had an awesome party. Let's have an awesome party too. It's almost like having a sweet 13 instead of a sweet 16, if you will. And I mean, no, there's nothing stopping there's nothing stopping somebody from having a party, of course, and but calling it a bar bat mitzvah party, that does feel a little bit of cultural appropriation, don't you think? I don't know. If you're not doing anything Jewish with it, it does feel a little strange. Um, so yeah, I mean, do societal trends, have a lot to do with it? Unquestionably. Um, and I think there is. Uh, there's an idea essentially that you're trying to uh, look. I mean, obviously, we live in a world, and this is a general. I don't know if I'd call it a rant, but like a general feeling that I have that I've talked about at different times. Um, One societal trend that I think impacts organize religion in ways that are just palpable in so many ways is that of the our ability in modern life to customize everything. We can customize everything to our exact specifications, right? We can do this on social media, right? Don't want somebody talking to us? Block, right? Want to send a message to only specific people? You can do that. Now, obviously, you can do that in real life too, to an extent, but makes it very easy to create something exclusive, right? Um, when it comes to the news we watch, right? I mean, we obviously have choices these days of news that is, you know, most definitely left-leaning, right-leaning, centrist, what have you. I mean, you can choose the news program based on things that you already believe. You can uh, we can the amount to which you can customize. I mean, essentially, like the fact that you can go online and like anytime you ask the question, I wonder if there's a product that does blank. I wonder if there is something that can make this. Pretty much you go to Amazon and you can find something like that. I mean, I'm not saying that there aren't new things being invented. I'm just saying, like, anything you can imagine, you can have somebody either it's already exists or you can have somebody create it for you. You can customize your life in so many ways. And so, uh, and that applies to a bar bat mitzvah for a lot of people. The idea that, I want my bar bat mitzvah to be this and that, and not these other things. Now, a lot of times that's harmless. A lot of times that's totally fine, right? You like this, you don't like that, you want it to be meaningful. All right, yeah, all right, great. The challenge becomes when you're at least from a synagogue standpoint, when you want to create um, a program in which you are, I mean, I talked about this idea about a partnership between a community, a congregation, and the person celebrating. The idea that we are celebrating this young person taking more responsibility and having a bar mitzvah just with the people that you want there kind of goes against the whole idea, because the idea is that in a community there's an idea of partnership, there's give and take, and so if you have a circumstance where a bar mitzvah celebrant, their family, only want things to their exact specification, and if a congregation were to say, hey, we have these expectations, and if they say, well, we don't want to meet those expectations, we want this just the way we want it, it's very easy for that family to just say, all right, well, I don't like the way it does it happens here. Well, we'll go somewhere else, or we'll create our own. You can do that, and that's okay. And by the way, I mean, listen, uh, most B'nai Mitzvah families buy into buy into the idea of partnership. I don't want to make it sound like that for every bar mitzvah we have, people who are just making, demands and demands and demands. No, no. I mean, like most of the time, there's this idea of, yeah, okay, the community is important and we want to share this with the community to at least a reasonable extent. So I don't want to make it sound like that dealing with people who want everything customized is the norm. I still don't think it is. But when you have that ability, that's sometimes a bit of the challenge of it all.
Yeah.
So
In the Hispanic community, they have a thing about a big party at 15. I don't know if this is a Catholic thing or just Hispanic, and just thinking maybe it's just Catholic. So I don't know if there's anything related to the bar bat mitzvahs.
Yeah, I mean, I believe you're speaking of a quinceañera, if I'm saying that correctly.
That's better than I
And
could say it.
I don't know much about the quinceañera. I do know that it's supposed to be a rite of passage of some sort, and usually involves a celebration, and I don't know. I don't know much about the origins of the Sweet 16. I don't know where that necessarily comes from. I mean, I've heard of that idea. I mean, you hear about that idea in popular culture. I don't know if that's and do people still have Sweet 16 parties or what have you? I mean, my kids didn't. I mean, then again, my kids had, celebrated bar mitzvah. So I mean, like, so they didn't necessarily feel they had to have like a whole thing.
Not the
So
age to get confirmed, 16.
in some synagogues they do that. Yeah, I guess we didn't talk about confirmation, and I mean, not that there's nearly as much to talk about when it comes to that. I would say that um, when it comes to so what is confirmation? So I was confirmed. And you're going to say you were confirmed as what exactly? No, it's I there was a confirmation program at at the synagogue where I grew up, Road of Shalom in Denver, Colorado. Um, and I was in a class of 11 people, and the easiest way to that people would explain it is that, oh, you are confirming the commitment that you made to living an active Jewish life that you first made, that commitment that you first made at your bar mitzvah. Um, uh, my understanding is that confirmation is something that originated in Christianity.
Yeah,
Um,
they're
I,
younger though.
Yeah, younger, true, and I know that there has been, and confirmation is sort of a trend. Again, I don't know a ton about it, in terms of its historical development. Um, I know confirmation is like I think there was at one point some Reform synagogues that argued that a bar mitzvah is not really the best time to talk about adulthood among young people. And when you have 13-year-olds, I mean, how adults are a lot of 13-year-olds? It kind of, it depends, right? I mean, I think it's fair to say, and this is not to insult the intelligence or ability of 13-year-olds. I think that um, I mean, Catherine, when you're talking about societal trends, one societal trend is that um, adulthood is something that is, yeah, and Mark, as you just commented, right? How adult are some 21-year-olds? Yeah, I mean, we are, and with all due respect to 21-year-olds, right? I mean, that we are, and please understand, present company excluded. So, um, uh, we adulthood seems to happen um, later on in life, in general. Okay, this is not to say this about every 13-year-old, 16-year-old, 21-year-old, etc. I mean, like, but in terms of putting adult responsibility in our general society, that seems to be happening later than it used to be.
Well, my sons did their uh, bar mitzvahs then at Temple FL a year apart. It it may be kind of crass, but it was a good plan to keep the uh, at least the boys, I can't speak for the girl, around for 3 more years in religious school. They
Right.
had built a
That's
program around
true.
that where you're doing this all as a group, and they stuck around because at 16 we also had trouble keeping them in the scouts too, the Boy Scouts. So
Sure.
yeah, it was the thing was it was like perfume and gasoline. That's if they don't get their eagle before they're 16, then they're gone.
And that's a big factor. It's when I was um uh, so I mean, then there's no question. I mean, yeah, that by having a confirmation program, um, you're you've created something like a little carrot for people to, stick around the synagogue, at least in some fashion. Um, the carrot for my group, when I was confirmed, was we got to go to New York City. We had a confirmation trip, which, for a bunch of Denverites in the early '90s, going to New York was like, oh, the big bad city. I mean, I'd never been, and it was, I mean, uh, I was kind of, I was very starstruck by the whole thing. Now, granted, New York City in the early '90s is much different than New York City of modern times, but still, it was a big deal to do that, and this was obviously a highlight. Um, when I was the rabbi at Emmanuel in Charleston, we actually changed confirmation to uh, to coincide with high school graduation because it felt kind of arbitrary to say, okay, well, 16, you're done. 16 is your confirmation. And the rationale for that was, oh, well, when they're juniors in high school, they're so busy with college and SATs, ACTs, etc. They're by the time they're juniors in high school, they're just too busy to expect them to do anything. And I don't think that's necessarily the case, right? Especially since, frankly, juniors in high school are often looking for extracurriculars to look good on a college application. So, my son Jonathan is a junior and he's added, being a religious school tutor. And it's like, okay, that's going to look good on, he likes it, but, it also looks good on an application. So, what is adulthood is basically a big question that is proper for society and proper for us to ask as well. Um, I often, bringing it back to the idea of bar mitzvah, I often emphasize the idea of you're beginning your adulthood. You're beginning taking on adult responsibilities. Um, I oftentimes when I talk to bar mitzvah students at the beginning of their preparation process, I say, "Okay, we're calling you an adult. So when you have the when you have your bar mitzvah, so at the end of it, we're going to give you car keys so you can drive. We're going to let you vote. We're also going to make you eligible for the military." We're going to, all these different things. And they usually say, whoa, 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 what are you talking? Hold on a second. I mean, some of that sounds nice, but, like, what are you talking about? And it's like, you're right. What are we talking about here? I mean, does that sound like something that you should be ready for? And they said, well, again, some of it sounds good, but not necessarily. And I said, yeah, yeah, well, that's the thing. As a society, for better or for worse, we have different markers of adulthood. Kind of, we kind of stagger them, don't we? Right? The age of driving of legally drinking alcohol, of being eligible for the military, voting. There are different ages.
That's called eligible for the draft.
Right, sure, sure. Absolutely,
Mm.
absolutely. And one of the things that an anecdote I've heard about teens in Israel is that teens in Israel are known behavior-wise to be very challenging. But then when they're 18, they go to the army and they come out of the army, and Israeli society looks at them and they say, okay, you've done that, you've done national service, you've and that there is a big transformation. Now, I'm not saying that that's in and of itself the answer, but I know that there have been a lot of people who have talked about, and I know we're maybe getting a little far afield, about the importance, the idea of around the time of college education, either before or after, the idea of having some sort of national service, not necessarily being in combat, not necessarily, not necessarily being in the military, but some sort of service to to the greater society. That's a whole other debate, and we're not here to, figure that out. But it is a kind of a similar idea that touches on to the idea that I'm speaking of in terms of a partnership between congregation and a bar bat mitzvah. The idea of what does a group owe to an individual? What does the individual owe to a group? Um, I actually do want to touch upon something else having to do with bar bat mitzvah that I realized that I didn't touch upon, which is, I've been talking all this time about it being you're 13 years old. Okay. A couple of things on that. One is, like I hope I explained the first time, when you're 13, um, when you turn 13, you are responsible for the commandments. No bar mitzvah ceremony celebration takes that away from you. So there have been a couple of different times in my career where people have said that, they've come to me and they've said, I don't know if my child is ready to celebrate at age 13. Can we have it a year or two after? There was one young man who I started working with, and let's just say this was not the most mature 12-year-old. Not a bad kid or by any stretch, but just not that very mature, right? And he wasn't taking the preparation seriously. Midway through, his parents said, let's put it off by a year. We want him to be, we wanted to mean something. We wanted him to feel ready. And we put it off for a year, and, turned out pretty nice. He did a good job, and he was more ready. And was it a little weird for him that, his peers were celebrating bar mitzvah before he was? Yeah, maybe a little, but I don't think it was, it turned out to be a really good decision. There are other families for whom, they kind of, for whatever reason, maybe they're not affiliated with a synagogue, or they're, until their child is 14, 15, 16 or something like that. And they say, can we do a bar mitzvah? Sure. Absolutely. And so it absolutely can be done. So that's one thing, right? It's never too late to do a bar mitzvah. Second of all, when we've been talking about 13-year-olds, you may be aware that there are some girls who celebrate bar bat mitzvah at age 12. This actually, for a while, was the norm. It was normal for a girl only had to be 12, while a boy had to be 13. A girl could have a bat mitzvah at a younger age. So, and I've always had like two conflicting thoughts about this. On one hand, my feeling has been that, like, all right, if we're egalitarian, if we believe in this idea of equality, 13-year-olds should be, 13 should just be the age, period. Regardless of gender, regardless of gendered identity, it's just what it should be. The flip side to that is, in general, again, not trying to make, sweeping overgeneralizations, but a typical 12-year-old girl, in terms of maturity compared to a 13-year-old boy, the girls are usually ahead, sometimes by a lot. It depends on the individual, of course, but
They stay that way too.
well, they stay that way too. Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm not here to dispute that. I'm not going to dispute it. And so I think that the argument is, I mean, I do understand the other side of the argument, and so, um, and so both of my children who identified as female at the time of their celebration, in both cases, we did the bat mitzvah um, uh, a handful of months prior to their 13th birthday. Turned out just fine. They were both in their 7th grade year, which is the typical year in which a bar bat mitzvah happens. And the nice thing about it is also we could be a little more flexible about which date we wanted to choose, right? It's fairly common in terms of like a bar mitzvah, where you try to get as close to the 13th birthday as possible. In other words, like the first the first Shabbat after the 13th birthday is oftentimes when a boy celebrates a bar mitzvah. Doesn't always have to be that way. You can obviously do it anytime after that. It turned out that my bar mitzvah was the first Shabbat after my 13th Hebrew birthday. It has to be 13 according to the Hebrew calendar, is the key. My son, Jonathan, my middle child, his bar mitzvah was actually 3 weeks prior to his English 13th birthday. But according to the Hebrew calendar, he was 13. So I was able to so we were able to have the bar mitzvah then. So you have a lot of different so anyway, so yeah, just in terms of accounting that, um yeah, I mean, it you have certain flexibilities, and you have to listen to what your kid needs, to what's going to make sense for them, in terms of scheduling it. Um, yeah, Linda, thank you for sharing, regarding your son, and your personal experience. Yeah, that, sometimes, people come to identifying, and feeling connected to the Jewish community a little bit later. And there's
At one point, he wanted to be a priest. Well, he
okay,
did grow up and, I was Jewish, so, he was half Jewish, but now he's really like, he had an Orthodox wedding. He's more into it.
sure, sure. So, so let's see. So anyway, so I want to make sure to at least cover that, and I really appreciate the questions and comments here. Anything else about bar mitzvah?
Could you back up on you were talking about confirmation? I
Sure, sure. We can
moving
talk
it
more
to
about that.
18, I think is brilliant, but I never had heard with my limited knowledge that you had the option. I thought it had to be 16.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I mean, with confirmation, I mean, look, there's an extent to which, what we've created for bar mitzvah is very much, human, it's very much human made. What we've done, besides the idea of when you're eligible to, to be counted for adulthood, I mean, most of what we've created has been, um, human made. With confirmation, that's completely human made. I mean, there's nothing about, I mean, in many cases, right? I mean, in biblical times, if you were 16, you were probably married with children at that point, you know?
Is that the congregation's discretion, or is it like who you're affiliated with? I mean, the conservative movement has a rule on that, and the reform have it, or just individual congregations decide what they want to do on it.
Yeah, I mean, individual congregations really decide, and in terms of like, I'll tell you about a couple of things that are more common when it comes to confirmation. One thing that is common, first of all, is the idea that you're doing it as a group, as opposed to a bar mitzvah, which is usually individual. Confirmation is usually like they do it as a class. So like I said, I had there were 11 kids and there were 11, in my class, and we were all, 10th graders. Um, and also another fairly common thing have is to have the confirmation ceremony and celebration at the around the holiday of Shavuot, which I know we haven't talked about in this class. The holiday of Shavuot is the commemoration of the revelation of the Torah and of the encounter at Mount Sinai. That's, biblically what it's supposed to be about. And so the idea is that of putting it with Shavuot is, first of all, on a practical level, it adds some good programming to the Shavuot festivities for a synagogue, and uh, and also, another convenience of it is that Shavuot takes place, um, but usually between the middle of May and the middle of June, which, depending on what people's school calendars are, it culminates with sort of the end of the school year. So it has kind of like a graduation feel to it. Um, then there's also the idea that, here we are, accepting the Torah, right? That Shavuot is about accepting the Torah, and so in that, so the confirmation is sort of in this similar vein that we are accepting the Torah. The main character of our Shavuot observance over the years has been the story, the book of Ruth. And Ruth is someone who is considered to be the first convert to Judaism, because Ruth grew up as a Moabite and had an opportunity to go back to her native land after her first husband dies. And in fact, Naomi, her mother-in-law, encourages her to go back to her native land. It's like, look, go and find a Moabite guy. I mean, like, you're young, you're still young, go and find, start a family. And she said, famously, your people shall be my people, your God shall be my God. Right. So she voluntarily chooses that path. And we read the book of Ruth on Shavuot. So much in that same vein, confirmation is kind of this idea that, you don't have, uh, look, you don't have to do any of it, but you really, whereas bar mitzvah, there is an assumption among affiliated Jewish families that, like, all right, you're going to have a bar mitzvah. I mean, that's going to happen, is oftentimes the approach people take. Confirmation is very much kind of an open question for a lot of families. Um, so anyway, so yeah, so those are things with confirmation, but in terms of what you learn, it varies wildly. It depends on what the rabbi and the education director or whatever kind of apparatus you have at a particular synagogue thinks is going to be interesting to get 15, 16-year-olds to come to classes and to have discussions, etc. Um, in terms of what I learned, I'm honestly not really remembering a lot of what I learned, to be perfectly honest, in my confirmation year. But I do know that we did make a point of learning a fair amount about um, like the immigrant experience, because we culminated it, like I said, with the trip to New York City. And New York City, of course, being the place of, um, where millions of Jews came from Eastern Europe through Ellis Island. And it is in many cases, the very hub of the beginning of the American Jewish experience. So there's I know we touched upon that. I don't remember other things, to be honest, but we but and I mean, I know the New York City trip. I mean, I remember a lot of things about the trip. Um and and part of the lure, of course, was that, I mean, you're getting people to come. It's like, yes, of course, we went to museums, and we went to services at different, a couple different synagogues on Shabbat, and we went to the Statue of Liberty. We did all those things, but of course, a big lure was, they got us tickets to the Phantom of the Opera, which was
Well, my
not
sons
easy.
were going. It seemed like the biggest thing was the time with the other kids, and at past 13, my sympathy was with the school director and the teachers to keep their mind on what they wanted to study, not each other,
Yeah.
because they wanted the goal to be with those other kids. Now, the once we got them there, that wasn't their problem. We get them there, and they had to behave, but it's still paying attention in class probably was a major issue, I imagine, for the teachers.
Sure, sure. No, no, I mean, and yeah, and obviously the social part was a big part of things, no question. And certainly played a role. So yeah, I mean, I remember, I mean, I regard my experience as being very positive. Um in the synagogue there, that's in that synagogue in Denver. um they do have a gallery of photos from confirmation classes throughout the congregation's history. Um, and so my picture is still up there on the walls of one of the rooms there, but with my confirmation class. Um, the problem with that for me was that day, we were outside like we were doing gym outside earlier in the day in which we took the picture, and like there was like a lot of wind and a little bit of like a couple of um like grains of sand like got into my got into my corneal idea, like got into like sort of my eye area, and like I didn't know what was going on with my eye, and so it looks in the picture like I either had pink eye or I was crying. And I didn't know what was going on with my eye. And we actually went to the doctor the next day. It's like, okay, I had to get eye drops and all that stuff. But yeah, so that is now immortalized on the wall, me with my pink eye slash crying slash whatever was going on with me. I was 15. It's okay. Um, yeah, Mark Siegel noted that yes, that was that yeah that yeah yeah that you can find picture of him on the walls of Heskemuna from his youth, hopefully not with the same eye issue that I had. Um, okay, other questions at the moment or things we that we want to discuss regarding, I guess, we've been talking about teenhood and other things. All right. Well, we can start. I mean, the we can start the conversation regarding marriage and weddings, which I mean, and we don't, and we probably won't finish, obviously within the next 20 minutes, but we can certainly go on next week. There will be much to there's a lot to discuss there.
What's the
Um,
plan at Temple Bethel for the new religious, well, not new, but restarting the religious school there? How are they going to do it there?
how they're going to do confirmation or B'nai Mitzvah
All that,
or
yeah, just they're just getting it restarted again.
yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. We'll have to see. But yeah, yeah. So yeah.
We're
So
we're a
go ahead.
long way from confirmation. We're going to restart K through third grade or K through fourth grade and then expand upward uh, because that's where we have a core of people. So we won't confront issues of confirmation most likely for, I don't know, 6 years, something like that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so and it's good. I mean, you got to start a little bit. You got to start somewhere, obviously, and so we do that. I guess we can also comment on, I mean, this isn't really a religious life cycle matter, but one thing that is, I think, an underrated part of the Jewish life cycle, not that there's anything formal about it per se, but it's uh, Jewish life on college campuses. Which I know at least a couple of you here have done some work with Jewish fraternities or sororities, and you've done in the Hillel and things like that. Um, those are I can say, at least in my own experience, that my involvement of Hillel in Hillel at my when I was an undergrad. Um, my involvement in Hillel, I don't think I would have been a rabbi had I not been involved in Hillel in the way I was. Um, and the big, for me, my the Hillel rabbi um, at the place where I got my undergraduate degree was like he was and still is, frankly, my rabbinic role model. And so for me, being involved in Hillel, which is, kind of, which is, I would say, the main, I mean, it is overall sort of the main Jewish organization for students on campus. Um, my involvement in Hillel was absolutely essential for me. Um, and I know that there are a number of people for whom their involvement in Hillel is a spark to reignite uh, young adults' passion for Judaism, to reignite or to ignite for the very first time. Um, for instance, I think, was it my first year or second year? One of them. Maybe it was my second year. Um, we celebrated an adult bat mitzvah at Hillel. There was a woman who was graduating college. And she says, you know what? I never had a bat mitzvah, and I'd like to do that. And um, one of the people who was active in one of the students who was active in Hillel, who was very knowledgeable and being able to teach, texts and how to chant Torah, chant the Haftarah, different things like that, tutored her. And she had a bat mitzvah where she read Torah, she read Haftarah, she did a speech. I mean, she did a very thorough job for that. Hillel was a big reason why she did that. Um, uh, Hillel's also a place. I mean, I know from International Hillel, their slogan was for a long time, and might still be, the idea of meet people where they're at. That actually, now, I mean, that sounds like a very kind of either a common phrase or a phrase that sounds very sort of, modern and things like that. But that actually comes from the Torah. The story in Genesis 21 of uh, Yishmael, who is Abraham's first child, the one he has with the handmaiden Hagar. In Genesis 21, this is actually what we read this Torah portion on the first day of Rosh Hashanah. In Genesis chapter 21, Abraham and Sarah finally have a child of their own, Isaac. And then, so now Abraham's got two sons with two different women. Yishmael with Hagar, back when Sarah thought that there'd be no way she'd be able to have a child, and then now Isaac. And so, um, uh, at a certain point, Sarah says, "You got to throw Yishmael and Hagar out of the house." Like, and we can get into all the details for that. But what winds up happening is that, Yishmael and Hagar, they're banished from the house. They're out in the middle of the desert. They're famished, they're parched, they are near death. And um and then God comes down, or God's messenger comes down and provides them with a well. And the voice from heaven says, I have heard the child's cry from where he was. That's the phrase that they use. It's like I heard that God hears Yishmael's cry from where he was. Um, and so that phrase has been borrowed and co-opted by Hillel, by the Hillel organization. In other words, to say you meet people where they're at, um, meaning whatever their knowledge association with Jewish life is, wherever that is, you're, it's like you start there and you go from there, which frankly is a good way for any Jew, frankly. I mean, at any stage of life, right? I mean, um, one of the things that the Hillel at my school did was, I mean, they fundraised for this, but they created these Seder to go kits in which they got donations so that they would give you a big bag. And if you wanted a big bag of things, and if you wanted to have your own Passover Seder, you could do it at no cost to you. And now they provided the basics, right? They provided, um, what do they do? They get because I did this every year. I made my own Seder every year, and so they would give me like they gave me like a whole kosher chicken, like and the whole kosher chicken. They gave like a jar of gefilte fish, which is I did not serve that, but they gave like mixes like the mix where you can make matzo ball soup. They gave you like a little jar of horseradish for the bitter herbs. Um, they gave you a little, like a plate that you could use to make a Seder plate. They gave you glasses, or like bottles of grape juice, and if you were 21 or over, you could get they gave you kosher wine. Like they gave you like the basic, and they also gave you the Haggadot, the books that you would use for it. I mean, so they gave you all the basics that you would need for a Passover Seder. And then what you did from there was up to you. Um, and I mean, as a college student, where it's like, where am I going to get a kosher chicken? Where am I going to, like, okay, like you were able to, they provided it for you. So there were a lot of different things that a Hillel could provide. And I know that some campuses have chapters of fraternities and sororities that are either entirely Jewish. I don't know how many are entirely Jewish nowadays, but where at least where there are where many Jews belong, and it makes it possible for Jewish students to not only make other Jewish friends, but also to um, even in some cases, provide like Jewish programming and activities for those students. Um, so there's, so college can be a time in which there are formative Jewish experiences uh, as people are figuring out a whole lot else, in their lives. Um, Mark Forbin, I guess if I could bother you for a second and ask about because I know you've done some work with AE Pi, right?
Well, my dad was a member. I started and then decided I didn't want to.
Okay,
Um, I uh, they when I was at UT, the group that was AE Pi at that time uh, was just not my type of people. They were a lot different than I was. Um, um, I believe Doug Weinstein he used to be the adult sponsor
okay,
of AE Pi. And of course, they no longer have a house, I don't think,
that's right.
because they wiped all that stuff out. If we could do anything, I would love to build a house for Hillel AE Pi and, you know,
Let's say pie.
it's a male Jewish fraternity for Jewish people. I don't know if they're all Jewish or not, but, it used to be anyhow all Jewish.
So there have been so I've already had a couple of students who have been in AE Pi and have connected with other Jewish students, and it's been a positive experience for them. Yeah, they don't have a house, I think, but I think they have like a number of people who I think they've rented their own house and they kind of informally do fraternity activities at that house, I think. So, um,
Well, you were saying like in college, when you start getting interested, after my about third attempt at college and having been 3 years in the Army, that's when I started looking around. I knew what I wasn't, but I didn't know what it was, and started looking. And this is like back in the late 60s that I started, trying to figure out what it was. And when I got to Florida State,
Yeah, at least it's
I think they had a hell house, I would think there, but you never got any idea it was open to anybody else, even people who were trying to figure out what they were and knew they weren't Christians. But so they, that's like something there. It sounded like you were saying it's open to Jewish people, but like when I went to the fraternity rush, I remember going to one house, it was all Boy Scouts. Well, I didn't want to do Boy Scouts anymore. And the biggest thing was after then living in barracks for 3 years, I wasn't moving in no, I wasn't going to move into another barracks if they call it the fraternity house or not. But the Jewish students, presumably they were there, but they weren't really making themselves known because I would have been certainly been interested in talking to him, but I thought, well, you can't be Jewish then. It took me, a long time
Yeah.
after that before I figured out there's ways that you don't have to be born Jewish to be Jewish. You just have to figure out what you are and do what you got to do. But
Right.
that's something they're missing.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And listen, look, I was not in a fraternity in college, so there's a limit to what I can really talk about or explain regarding that. I mean, in fraternities and sororities, I mean, some people have a great experience with it. Some people are not in it, and it's fine. Like I mean, like there's a lot of different. There are many different ways to have a to use your time when in college. Um, I was, however, I will say, and I'll maybe close with this little anecdote. There was in Denver, I don't think it exists anymore, a an Orthodox Jewish Boy Scout troop, which I was part of for a few years. Um, and why did I leave it? Because it drove me nuts. Okay. Honestly, I could never figure out all the knots you had to learn how to do. But I mean, no, but in all seriousness, I mean, like, yeah. So there's we have a lot of different ways to. I think if there's one thing we got today is it's that there are many different ways in which we move from childhood to adulthood in in Jewish life, and we can create a lot of a lot of that. So so what so okay so we we've reached the end of our time here today. So next Sunday definitely we'll get into marriage, weddings, etc., and see how long the discussion takes us. But I again appreciate the conversation as always. So have a good day, everybody.
Yeah.